Hello and good night, my dear listeners. Before we begin our story that will gently lull you into deep and restful sleep, I invite you to take a moment to calm your mind and body. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders and feel yourself relax. With each word and sound, you will drift deeper into a world of dreams. Now, let's begin our journey. On the morning Clara arrived at Lulworth Cove, the sea took on a soft, silvery sheen under the early sun and cast gentle waves that lapped like whispers on the shore. The village lay between rugged cliffs, dotted with small cottages and framed by the green sweep of hills that seemed to look protectively over the bay. She felt an immediate sense of peace here, as if time itself had slowed down to match the quiet rhythm of the waves. Clara came to Lulworth looking for a change. After years of painting in the busy streets of the city, she longed for a place where her brush could capture something deeper, something untouched. She had heard stories about the village and its mysterious lighthouse that had stood abandoned on the cliffs for generations. The locals whispered that the lighthouse held secrets from the past, stories hidden in the mist that washed in with the evening tide. On her first walk in the village, Clara felt the gentle gaze of the townspeople, kind, curious but respectful of her solitude. It was a place that welcomed visitors with quiet hospitality, offering them room to breathe. She made her way towards the cliffs, where the lighthouse towered against the sky, its white stone softened by years of sea and salt. Even though its light no longer shone, Clara could almost feel a lingering energy, as if the lighthouse itself was waiting, patient and silent. That evening, as she settled into her little cottage by the beach, Clara felt the pull to the lighthouse again. She gathered up her sketchbook, wrapped herself in a warm scarf, and stepped out into the gentle twilight. The sea breeze carried a fresh, salty fragrance, and the village lights flickered on, one after the other, casting warm glows that seemed to melt into the evening mist. As Clara walked up the path to the cliffs, she felt the air cool, and the mist thicken around her like a veil. The lighthouse stands in the distance, a silent sentinel over the bay. Each step brought her closer to her mystery, her anticipation building like the gentle hum of the waves below. When she reached the top, Clara stopped and looked at the view. The ocean stretched out endlessly, darkening with nightfall, and the lighthouse stood a few meters away, its weathered stones glinting faintly in the last light of day. She approached cautiously, reaching out to touch the cold surface, running her fingers over the rough texture as if it might tell her its secrets. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared on the horizon, startling Clara. She squinted, wondering if her eyes were deceiving her, but the glow persisted, a pale, ghostly light hanging low over the water, faint but unmistakable. She felt a chill go through her, a mixture of awe and unease. The light seems to be calling her like a silent whisper. Feeling compelled to sketch the scene, she quickly pulled out her notebook and captured the mysterious glow, the scar of her pencil. The silence of the night enveloped Clara as she descended from the cliffs, her mind alive with the glow she had just seen over the water. The ghostly light lingered in her thoughts, as if it had left an imprint more vivid than her hurried sketches. She wondered if it would appear again, or if she'd simply imagined it, an artist's mind filling in gaps with mysteries where none existed. Back in her cozy cottage, Clara set down her sketchbook and gazed out the window at the inky blackness of the cove. The sea was hidden beneath the night, but the soft rush of the waves brushing against the shore played a steady, rhythmic lullaby. She wondered if anyone in the village knew about the light, or if it was a secret only the cliffs held. The following morning, she decided to explore the village more thoroughly. Sunlight spilled over the cobbled streets, casting long shadows from the stone cottages and warming the morning chill. Locals bustled quietly, exchanging greetings and tending to small gardens. Clara found herself drawn to an old bookshop tucked between two larger houses, its wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aging paper and polished wood. The shelves were crammed with books, many of which looked as though they hadn't been touched in decades. Clara drifted through the aisles, her fingers grazing the spines until she reached a section dedicated to local folklore and history. She picked up a worn, leather-bound volume titled Whispers of the Coast and flipped through its pages, hoping for a mention of the lighthouse or the strange light she'd seen. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You must be new to Lulworth." Clara looked up to see an elderly woman standing at the counter, her eyes sharp and curious. She wore a faded wool cardigan and had the look of someone who had spent years observing the world with quiet interest. "I arrived yesterday," Clara replied with a polite smile. "This place feels timeless." The woman nodded knowingly. "It is, in its way. Lulworth hasn't changed much over the years, and neither has that old lighthouse on the cliffs." Clara felt a jolt of excitement. "You know about the lighthouse?" "Oh, everyone here knows about it," the woman replied with a mysterious smile. "But few speak of it. The stories say it's been there longer than the village itself. It was once a guiding light for sailors, and some say for those lost between worlds." Clara leaned forward, captivated. "Between worlds?" The woman's gaze seemed to sharpen, as though weighing how much to share. "There are those who say the lighthouse connects this world with another. An older, quieter realm. People have seen strange lights over the water, especially on misty nights, but only those who seek answers, or who carry the burden of loss, ever seem to see them." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, remembering the ethereal glow she'd witnessed. She had come to Lulworth looking for inspiration, for something to fill the blank spaces on her canvas, but now it felt like she'd stumbled into a story far older than she'd anticipated. "What happens to those who follow the light?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Some return, changed, carrying stories that make little sense to those who haven't seen it. Others, well, some say they're called away, never to return." The woman's voice softened, a hint of sadness slipping through. "But most come back with a new understanding of themselves or of something they needed to let go." Clara left the shop with the old book in hand, her mind brimming with possibilities. She spent the day reading about Lulworth Cove's history, its legends of lost sailors and ghostly apparitions. Each story seemed to blend into the next, creating a tapestry of mystery that felt both timeless and deeply rooted in the landscape around her. As night fell, Clara felt the pull to return to the lighthouse. She wrapped herself in her scarf and coat, carrying her sketchbook once again, and set out along the path toward the cliffs. The mist was thicker tonight, swirling around her as she climbed, giving the world a dreamlike quality. It was as if she were moving through another realm, caught between waking and sleeping. When she reached the lighthouse, she placed a hand against its cold stone, feeling the weight of years pressing back against her touch. The light over the water hadn't appeared yet, but she sensed it would. She felt as though something, or someone, was watching, waiting for her. Just as she was about to turn back, the light returned. It floated over the sea, closer this time, casting a faint, shimmering glow that danced across the waves. Clara's heart pounded as she watched, mesmerized. The light felt alive, almost sentient, as though it were aware of her presence. Taking a deep breath, she sketched the scene once more, her hand moving quickly over the page, but the light seemed to grow brighter, intensifying until it was almost blinding. She shielded her eyes, and for a moment she thought she could hear a voice, a faint whisper carried on the wind, calling her name. Clara. The sound was barely audible, but it resonated deep within her, filling her with a strange sense of recognition. She couldn't place it, but the voice felt familiar, as though it belonged to someone she had known long ago. As suddenly as it had appeared, the light dimmed, fading back into the mist until it was gone. Clara stood there, breathless, her sketchbook clutched in her hands. She felt both exhilarated and unsettled, as though she had glimpsed something beyond her understanding. Returning to her cottage, she found it difficult to sleep. She lay awake, her thoughts circling around the light and the voice she'd heard. Who or what was trying to reach her? And why did it feel as though the lighthouse held the key to a story only she could uncover? The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Clara's cottage, casting soft golden stripes across the wooden floorboards. She hadn't managed much sleep after the previous night's encounter. The whisper that called her name, so delicate yet so profound, lingered in her mind. It replayed in her thoughts like a forgotten melody, half remembered from childhood. She rose slowly, feeling the weight of curiosity and a touch of apprehension pressing on her chest. Clara's gaze drifted to the sketch she had made. Its rough lines captured the ethereal glow and the way it shimmered across the dark waves. But no pencil or ink could truly replicate the feeling that light had stirred within her. She set the drawing aside and prepared herself for another day of exploration, this time determined to learn more about the mysterious whisper. The village square was alive with its usual morning routines. Fishermen unloaded their catch, children skipped through narrow lanes, and shopkeepers swept the stoops of their stores. Clara made her way back to the bookshop, hoping the elderly woman might share more about the legends she had hinted at. Ah, back so soon. The woman's eyes sparkled with a knowing gleam as Clara approached the counter. Clara offered a small smile. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said yesterday, about the lighthouse connecting to another realm. I went back there last night, and I saw the light again, and I heard something, a voice. The woman's expression shifted, her gaze becoming more serious. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out another book, older and more worn than the first. Its leather cover was cracked, and the title was barely legible. You heard the whisper, didn't you? The woman's voice was almost reverent. Clara nodded, feeling a chill. It said my name. It felt familiar, like someone I've known. The woman opened the book, revealing pages filled with delicate handwriting and sketches of the lighthouse, the cove, and strange symbols. She pointed to a passage written in faded ink. The whispers are said to come from those who are caught between the worlds, spirits who have left unfinished stories behind. Clara's heart quickened. Why would they call to me? The woman studied her for a moment before replying. Only you can answer that, my dear. But I suspect you may have a connection to this place deeper than you realize. The words resonated, sparking memories Clara had pushed aside long ago, dreams of the sea, stories her grandmother used to tell of sailors who ventured too far and found themselves lost in realms of mist and shadow. Could it be that those tales were more than just bedtime stories? Determined to seek more, Clara thanked the woman and left with the old book clutched tightly to her chest. She spent the afternoon reading by the window, the sunlight shifting as time passed, casting shadows that seemed to dance across the pages. The book spoke of the lighthouse as a portal, a guide for those seeking passage, not just across seas, but through worlds. It told of a mariner who had vanished, leaving only whispered legends and a single line. "The follow the light is to find what is lost." The weight of the words settled heavily on Clara. She glanced up from the pages, her eyes drawn once more to the silhouette of the lighthouse in the distance. Its presence loomed, both guardian and enigma. As evening approached, the pull she felt grew stronger. Clara wrapped herself in her scarf and coat, the old book tucked under her arm, and set out along the winding path to the cliffs. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and damp earth, and the sky faded to a dusky blue, tinged with the first stars of night. The lighthouse stood solemn and unchanging, but tonight it felt different. Claire placed her hand against the stone, just as she had before, and whispered into the wind, "I'm here." A sudden gust swept through, rustling her hair and the pages of the book she held. The light appeared again, gliding over the water, and with it came the whisper, clearer now. "Clara, come home." The voice filled the space around her, resonating deep within her chest. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. When she opened them again, the light had moved closer, hovering just beyond the edge of the cliff. It pulsed gently, inviting. Heart pounding, Clara took a tentative step forward, the world blurring at the edges as she approached the light. The whispers mingled with the roar of the sea, a chorus that spoke of lost memories, of journeys unfinished. And then, without warning, the ground beneath her shifted, the air thickened, and the world fell away as she reached out. For a moment, everything was still, suspended between breath and heartbeat. Clara was no longer standing on the cliff. She was somewhere else, a place where the mist was luminous and voices wove through the air like threads, guiding her deeper into the unknown. Clara's breath caught in her chest as she tried to make sense of where she was. The world around her glimmered with an otherworldly sheen. Wisps of silver mist drifted like living veils, swirling and reshaping with each hesitant step she took. It was as if she had crossed a threshold into a place suspended between dream and reality, a realm that breathed with the whispers of forgotten souls. The landscape was unlike anything she had seen before. The ground underfoot was soft, almost spongy, and glowed faintly with an iridescent light. Towering above her were crystalline structures that seemed to hum, resonating with a frequency that made her chest thrum in response. Everything was suffused with a dim glow, as if bathed in perpetual twilight. Clara. The voice was clearer now, gentle and beckoning. It felt closer, and this time she recognized an unmistakable familiarity. It wasn't just a voice calling her. It was the essence of someone who had once been a part of her life. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. She turned in the direction of the whisper, eyes searching the shrouded expanse for any sign of movement. "Hello?" Her voice was small, tentative, almost swallowed by the murmurs that rustled through the mist. The only response was a soft rustle, like the brush of fabric or the distant sweep of the sea. Clara took a deep breath and pressed forward. The air felt denser, carrying an electric charge that raised the hair on her arms. As she walked, she noticed figures beginning to form within the mist. They were ethereal, shifting and dissolving as soon as she tried to focus on them. Shadows that hinted at forms, some familiar, others strange and disquieting, seemed to hover at the edge of her vision. One figure lingered longer than the others. A tall man with broad shoulders and dark hair stood at the edge of a translucent ridge, his back turned to her. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. "Papa!" The word escaped her lips before she could stop it. The figure didn't move, but the air seemed to tighten with recognition. Memories she hadn't dared to revisit flooded her, of sitting at her father's knee, listening to tales of the sea, his deep voice painting stories that felt as boundless as the ocean itself. She stepped closer, each movement careful, as if afraid to break the fragile moment. "Clara." The voice this time was more distinct, filled with a warmth that wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. She reached out, her fingers grazing the air just as the figure began to dissolve back into the shifting mist. "No, wait," she cried, the sudden absence pressing into her chest like a vice. The mist thickened, swirling around her in agitated patterns. The ground beneath her feet shuddered, and she stumbled, falling to her knees. a sudden silence descended, so complete that it rang in her ears. In that moment of stillness, Clara became aware of another presence, one that felt ancient, watchful. "You should not be here." The voice was different from the one she had heard before. It was deeper, resonant, and layered with an authority that sent a chill through her. Clara looked up, and from the shifting fog emerged a figure clad in robes that shimmered with the colors of the sea. Deep blue, silvery white, and emerald green. His face was obscured by a hood, but his eyes, luminescent and sharp, glittered like polished opal. "Who are you?" Clara whispered, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "A guardian of what lies between," he replied. "You stand at the crossroads of memory and fate, Clara. Few have tread this path and returned unchanged." The guardian's gaze softened as he studied her. "You seek something, do you not?" Clara swallowed, her throat tight. "I'm not even sure what I seek. I followed the light. I heard." She hesitated. "I heard my father's voice." The guardian's expression remained unreadable. He extended a hand, and with a graceful sweep, the mist around them parted to reveal a path leading deeper into this strange realm. There is more to see, more to remember. But be warned, not all memories are kind, and not all echoes are what they seem. Clara stood on shaky legs and followed, each step resonating through the stillness. The path wove between crystalline pillars and pools of liquid light that glistened with 1,000 shades. The figures in the mist continued to drift past, their expressions unreadable, their stories locked within the luminous haze. They reached a clearing where the mist thinned, revealing a vast expanse of shimmering water that stretched endlessly, mirroring the swirling sky above. On the shore stood an ancient structure, its stones carved with symbols that seemed to move when she blinked, shifting like the tide. "This place," Clara began, her voice barely audible. She felt a tug deep within her, as if something unseen was calling out, resonating with the core of her being. The guardian nodded. "This is the echo pool. It holds the memories of those who have crossed between worlds. Some come here to remember, others to forget." He turned to her, his eyes holding an intensity that made her breath catch. "You may find what you seek here, Clara, but the choice to look comes with its own cost." Clara approached the edge of the pool, the surface rippling as if aware of her presence. When she peered into the liquid, scenes began to take form. A little girl running along the shore, laughter mingling with the crash of waves. A storm-tossed sea and the dark silhouette of a ship straining against the wind. A man's voice calling out, desperate and defiant, desperate and defiant. Tears stung her eyes as the images wove together. The voice, her father's voice, echoed from the depths, clearer than ever. "Clara, find the light. Remember the stories." The guardian's voice broke through the flood of memory. "The light that calls to you is both guide and trial. It will illuminate what has been hidden, but will also reveal truths that may test your resolve." Clara turned to face him, determination hardening her features. I need to know. The guardian's nod was solemn, almost resigned. Then step forward and let the echo pool show you what lies beyond. As Clara stepped into the water, the coolness seeped into her skin, and the world around her shifted once more. The whispers returned, louder this time, weaving tales of love, loss, and the thin boundary between hope and despair. The pool's light flared, enveloping her as she sank into its embrace, ready to uncover the secrets that had long awaited her return. Clara felt the chills spread from her toes, up through her body, as she sank deeper into the silken embrace of the echo pool. The water, cool and effervescent, surrounded her, carrying the weight of memories, so potent they seemed to vibrate in her very bones. The light intensified, shifting from a soft glow to a piercing brilliance, swallowing her vision and filling her mind with sounds, the crash of waves, the distant call of a gull, and whispers interlaced with the sigh of the sea. Clara. The voice murmured again, but now it was clearer, more defined. It carried a tone that was rich, resonant, familiar. The voice of her father. She opened her eyes, expecting to see the crystalline mist and the ethereal forms drifting around her, but the world that met her was different. The echo pool had brought her somewhere else, a place painted in hues of dusk. Shadows played across a beach she recognized, one she had visited countless times in her childhood. The same jagged rocks jutted defiantly from the shore, and the old wooden pier creaked with the weight of memories. Yet there was an otherworldly quality to everything. The edges shimmered as if caught in a perpetual state of becoming and dissolving. Is this real? Clara whispered, touching the sand beneath her feet. It felt solid, cool, gritty against her fingertips. Real enough, said a voice behind her. She turned quickly, heart thudding in her chest. Standing before her was a figure she had not seen in over 15 years. Her father, strong, tall, with eyes that mirrored the deep blue of the sea. He wore the same weathered coat she remembered, its fabric frayed at the cuffs from years of facing the salty wind. Papa. Her voice trembled, eyes welling with tears. He smiled, a warm, wistful expression that deepened the lines around his eyes. Clara, my brave girl. Unable to resist, Clara surged forward, throwing her arms around him. He felt real, solid, warm. The embrace was achingly familiar, the scent of salt and earth bringing back memories of days spent on the cliffs, listening to his stories about the sea and the unseen wonders it concealed. How is this possible? She whispered, pulling back to study his face. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek, his touch as gentle as she remembered. There are places where the barriers between worlds thin, where memories and reality blend. The lighthouse stands as a beacon in those places, guiding the lost, the seekers, and the restless spirits. Clara's mind raced with questions. Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back? His expression shifted, shadows passing over his features. There are forces greater than we can comprehend. Clara, I was called to something beyond our world, and once you step through that threshold, returning is not as simple as turning back." Before she could ask more, a sudden breeze swept across the beach, carrying with it a voice not unlike the guardian's but sharper, more insistent. "Clara, time is short." Her father's eyes darkened with urgency. "Listen to me, Clara. The light, it's not just a guide. It's a test. It reveals and it guards. You must be careful what you seek, for not all truths bring comfort." The wind picked up, and the sky above shifted from the deep blue of twilight to a stormy, restless gray. The sea roared louder, and the ground trembled beneath them. Clara reached for her father, but his form began to fade, dissolving into the shimmering mist. "No!" Clara cried, her voice swallowed by the wind. But before she could move, she was back in the echo pool, standing waist deep in the cool, glowing water. "Did you find what you sought?" The guardian's voice resonated from the shore, steady and inscrutable. Clara's breath came in ragged bursts. "I saw him, my father. He said the light was a test." The guardian nodded, his opalescent eyes narrowing. "And did you understand his warning?" She looked down at the shifting light of the pool, the reflections dancing across her skin. "I don't know," she admitted, the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. "But I have to." The guardian stepped forward, his robes brushing the water. "Then the path before you remains. There is one who may help you understand, an old keeper of stories, bound to the light and shadow alike." Clara's gaze lifted. "Where can I find them?" A faint smile crossed the guardian's face, a rare softness. "You already know where to look. The lighthouse holds more than just echoes, Clara. It holds keys to the past and future." With that, the light around her pulsed once more, and the world tilted, sending her spiraling back to the shore of Lulworth Cove. She gasped as her body hit the cool, damp sand, the roar of the sea thundering in her ears. The mist had lifted, revealing a sky pierced with stars. Clara sat up slowly, her heart still pounding. The cottage lights in the distance looked like scattered fireflies, warm and inviting, but the lighthouse loomed dark and silent, a solemn sentinel against the night. "It's not over," she whispered, the memory of her father's touch still clinging to her skin. The path was set. The light's secrets awaited, and with them, the truth about her father's journey, her own destiny, and the whispers that had called her back to Lulworth Cove. Clara sat on the cool, damp sand, the roar of the sea receding to a soft, rhythmic pulse as her heartbeat slowed. The events within the echo pool still swirled in her mind, vivid and startling, leaving her feeling both shaken and resolute. Her father's words echoed in her thoughts. The light was more than a guide. It was a test, revealing truths both illuminating and harsh. She needed to know more, even if the path ahead was uncertain and laced with the specter of revelation. The sky above was a tapestry of deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed to pulse with their own secret whispers. The lighthouse, dark and stoic, loomed above her, its silhouette cut sharply against the heavens. Clara's gaze fixed on it, the ancient structure that now felt less like an abandoned relic and more like a sentient guardian, holding tightly to secrets she was bound to uncover. Shivering, she pushed herself to her feet, brushing the wet sand from her coat. The wind nipped at her cheeks, carrying with it the familiar scent of sea and salt. The pull she felt toward the lighthouse was no longer just a curiosity. It was an insistent thrumming in her chest, urging her onward. With one last glance at the distant, twinkling lights of the village, she started up the winding path that led to the cliffs. As she climbed, the path grew steeper, the rocks more jagged under her feet. The whisper of the sea was joined by the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub and the sharp cry of a gull. Her breath came in shallow puffs, visible in the crisp night air. The world around her seemed suspended, each step forward a motion into a realm that felt more dreamlike the closer she came to the lighthouse. When she reached the structure, she paused, taking in its weathered stones. Up close, the lighthouse seemed taller, its worn facade marked by deep grooves and patches where the white paint had peeled away, revealing the coarse stone beneath. The wooden door, once sturdy and proud, now looked warped and splintered by time and the relentless sea winds. Clara took a deep breath and placed her hand on the rough surface, feeling the chill seep into her palm. It was as if the lighthouse exhaled an ancient breath, acknowledging her presence. "You hold more than just stories, don't you?" she whispered, half to herself and half to her silent giant before her. With a firm push, the door creaked open, the sound groaning like a long, forgotten voice waking from slumber. Inside, the air was musty, tinged with the scent of sea brine and old wood. Moonlight filtered through cracked, dust-laden panes, casting thin beams across the spiraling stone staircase that led up into darkness. Clara's steps echoed as she ascended, the silence broken only by the occasional groan of the structure and the faint whisper of the wind squeezing through narrow gaps in the stone. Halfway up, Clara noticed something she hadn't before. Etchings carved into the wall. The symbols were unfamiliar, swirling shapes that seemed to tell a story only the lighthouse could understand. She traced one of the carvings with her fingertips, feeling the grooves rough and deep, as if etched with purpose. There were whispers in these marks, too, she realized. An echo of whoever had stood here, hands trembling, carving out their secrets. At the top of the staircase, Claire found herself in a circular room. The large glass panes that surrounded the space were clouded and cracked, but they offered a panoramic view of the sea, dark and endless, speckled with white caps that gleamed in the moonlight. The room was almost empty, save for a few scattered remnants. An old wooden chair, the frame splintered, a desk covered in layers of dust, with parchment sheets scattered across it as if abandoned mid-thought. She moved toward the desk, brushing aside the dust and picking up a piece of parchment. The ink was faded, the words written in a hand that wavered but held urgency. "The light knows the way. but it is not for the faint of heart. Those who seek its truth must carry the burden of their past and be willing to face the shadow it casts. Clara's fingers trembled as she read. The guardian's words came back to her. Not all echoes are what they seem. The light was indeed a test, one that pulled at the deepest threads of memory and reality, weaving them into something new, something profound. A sudden sound made her spin around. The chair, which had been leaning precariously, tipped over, landing with a thud. Clara's pulse quickened as the air grew colder, and a shape began to materialize on the far side of the room. It was faint at first, like a shadow cast by an unseen light, but it grew more solid, taking on the form of a woman. Her figure was wrapped in a cloak that shimmered with a translucent glow, and her eyes, pale and luminous, locked onto Clara's with an intensity that spoke of both sorrow and determination. "Who are you?" Clara asked, voice wavering. The woman stepped forward, her presence more defined with each step. "I am Eleonora, keeper of the stories bound to this light," she said, her voice like the echo of a distant wave. Clara's eyes widened. "You're the one the guardian spoke of." Eleonora nodded, her gaze softening. "And you are the seeker, the one who carried both the memory and the hope. You have come far, Clara, but the questions you hold, the answers you seek, they come with a price." "I need to understand," Clara said, taking a step closer. "Why did my father disappear? What is this light, truly?" Eleonora's expression darkened, the glow of her form flickering slightly. "The light is a bridge, a beacon that calls to those caught between worlds. Your father was one of many who heard its call, who ventured too far into the places where the boundaries thin. Some find answers, others lose themselves." A chill ran down Clara's spine. Did he find what he was looking for? "He found a truth," Eleonora said. The words weighted with meaning. "But not all truths bring solace. Some truths open doors that cannot be closed." Clara's mind raced, connecting fragments of stories, memories of whispered tales, and her father's voice speaking of places beyond the veil of the known. "Can I find him? Is he here?" Eleonora's eyes, bright as moonstones, held Clara's with a sympathetic sorrow. "You carry part of him within you, Clara. To seek him is to seek that part of yourself that has always been bound to the sea and its mysteries. But be warned. The light may show you what you wish to find, and it may reveal what you never wanted to see." The room seemed to pulse with a sudden energy, the walls shivering with an unseen force. The light in the center of the room, long dormant, flared to life, casting a beam so bright it pierced through the thick glass panes and shot into the night. Clara shielded her eyes as the light swept over the sea, illuminating the horizon in a line of silver. When she lowered her hand, Eleonora was gone, leaving only the faintest shimmer in the air where she had stood. But the light continued to shine, and with it came a sound, a distant, mournful song that seemed to rise from the depths of the ocean itself. Clara moved to the window, pressing her palms against the cool glass. Out over the water, shapes began to appear, their outlines glowing faintly in the silver beam. Ships, spectral and vast, drifting as though suspended in time. She could see sailors aboard, their forms indistinct yet undeniably human, and beyond them a figure stood at the prow of the nearest ship, looking back at her with eyes as blue and deep as the sea's depths. "Papa," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. The figure raised a hand, the gesture slow and deliberate, as if trying to bridge the impossible distance between them. The song grew louder, weaving through the air, filling her with an aching longing. "Find the light, Clara," the voice of her father carried to her, mingling with the song and the whispers. "Find the truth." The beam of light from the lighthouse brightened, its power growing, vibrating through the stones beneath her feet. Clara felt a pull deep within her chest, as if the light itself was drawing her forward, beckoning her to step beyond the threshold of the known world and into the mysteries that lay waiting. The glow of the lighthouse beam illuminated the night, casting long fingers of silver across the dark sea. Clara stood transfixed at the window, the echoes of her father's voice and the spectral ship swirling in her mind. The wind outside carried a chill that seeped into her bones, but she felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading from within, fueled by the sight of him, the man who had filled her childhood with stories and songs, the man who had vanished without a trace. "Find the truth," he had said, the words still reverberating in her chest like the low hum of a ship's bell. The beam of light from the lighthouse pulsed again, its brightness intensifying as it reached out across the horizon, piercing through the mist and touching the distant spectral fleet. The ghostly outlines of the ships glowed softly, their forms wavering like reflections on water. Clara's breath quickened as she watched, torn between awe and the weight of the unknown. The room around her seemed to vibrate with energy, each pulse of light resonating through the wooden floorboards beneath her feet. The song, that strange and mournful hymn, wove through the air both a call and a lament. Clara could feel its tug deep in her core, as if it was reaching out, pulling her towards something beyond comprehension. "Eleonora," she whispered, hoping the ethereal keeper would reappear, but the room remained empty, save for the flickering shadows cast by the light. Clara's eyes settled on the desk, its surface still scattered with the faded parchments. Her fingers brushed over them, seeking some clue, some hidden key that might guide her next steps. One sheet caught her eye, the ink darker and fresher than the others. It was marked with a map of the cove and the surrounding waters, annotated with cryptic notes and lines that seemed to trace a path out to sea. At the center of the path was a symbol, an intricate swirling shape that reminded Clara of the carvings on the staircase walls. "The crossing," she murmured, tracing the symbol with her fingertip. The air in the room seemed to shift as she spoke, a sudden silence pressing against her eardrums. It was as if the lighthouse itself had paused to listen. Before she could fully process the map's meaning, a new sound reached her. It was faint at first, carried on the wind like a whisper, but it grew clearer. The creak of wood and the rhythmic thud of oars slicing through water. Clara's heart leapt into her throat as she turned back to the window. A small rowboat, its hull weathered and dark, was making its way toward the shore below the lighthouse. It glided over the waves with an uncanny smoothness, cutting through the sea as if guided by an unseen hand. In the boat stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their features obscured by the hood of a long, dark coat. Clara's first instinct was to run, to retreat into the safety of the lighthouse's stone embrace, but something held her in place, an invisible thread that anchored her to the spot. The figure in the rowboat raised a lantern, its glow casting a golden halo around them. They looked up, directly at her, and though their face remained hidden, Clara felt the unmistakable pull of recognition. "Who are you?" she whispered, pressing her palms against the glass. The figure did not answer, but the boat reached the shore, bumping gently against the rocks, as if propelled by the will of the sea itself. Clara's breath came in shallow bursts as she watched the cloaked stranger step onto the shore and begin the climb up the path that led to the lighthouse. Every muscle in her body tensed. Part of her wanted to flee, to bolt down the staircase and lock the door behind her, but another part, the part that had followed the light, that had seen her father's spectral form, urged her to stay. Footsteps echoed up the spiral staircase, slow and deliberate. The old wood creaked beneath each step, the sound reverberating through the silence. Clara's eyes darted to the door, half expecting it to burst open. Instead, there was a pause, a moment so stretched and taut that she could hear the frantic thudding of her own heartbeat. Knock, knock. The sound was sharp and sudden, making Clara jump. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to work. "Who's there?" "A seeker like you," came the reply, low and rough, yet somehow familiar. Clara hesitated for a moment before moving to the door. Her hand hovered over the latch, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. With a deep breath, she opened the door. The figure stood in the threshold, lantern held high. Beneath the shadow of the hood, a pair of eyes met hers, a startling blue that mirrored her own. The hood fell back, revealing a man's face, weathered by wind and sea, but unmistakably alive with the spark of recognition. "Clara," he said, the word wrapped in a voice that time had not dulled. Tears welled in her eyes. "Papa." He nodded, a smile breaking through the weariness etched across his features. "You found the light," he said, as if it were the answer to every question. Before she could speak, the room filled with the hum of the lighthouse, the beam flaring bright and fierce. The air crackled with energy, and the song, that haunting, mournful song, rose again, filling the room with its resonance. Clara's father stepped inside, setting the lantern down and reaching for her hand. "There is so much I need to tell you," he said, his eyes searching hers, their depths carrying the weight of years lost and stories untold. "But first, you need to understand why this light calls to us." Clara's throat tightened with emotion, but she nodded. The room felt smaller now, the light pressing in as if demanding to be heard. Her father gestured to the map on the desk, his finger tracing the path she had studied moments before. "The crossing," he said. "It's a passage, Clara. A place where worlds converge, where those who are lost can find their way." She swallowed, the weight of the realization settling over her. "But why? Us?" "Because we are bound to it," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "The stories, the echoes, they are part of who we are. This light, it chose us long ago." The beam outside shifted, its light cutting through the darkness in steady sweeping arcs. Clara felt the room grow warmer, the air heavy with anticipation. The spectral ships on the horizon glimmered brighter, their forms becoming more defined, as if waiting for something. Or someone to act. "What happens now?" she asked, the question trembling on her lips. Her father's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. "Now, we face the truth, and we decide what to do with it." Before Clara could respond, a sudden surge of light burst from the heart of the room, flooding it with a brilliance that blinded her. She closed her eyes against the searing glow, feeling the heat of it press against her skin. When she opened them again, the lighthouse was gone, replaced by a landscape that defied everything she knew. They stood on the deck of a ship, the wood beneath their feet solid and real, yet surrounded by an ocean of silver mist that stretched as far as the eye could see. The spectral ships she had seen from the lighthouse now drifted nearby, their ghostly sails catching an unfelt wind. "Where are we?" Claire breathed, her voice small amidst the vastness. "The place between," her father said, "the crossing." The song that had haunted her for so long swelled around them, voices layered and harmonious, weaving a story that resonated with the essence of hope and loss. The sailors aboard the spectral ships turned to look at them, their expressions unreadable but not unkind. Clara's father turned to her, eyes shining with a mixture of pride and worry. "This is where choices are made, Clara, where those who are lost can find their way home, or be lost forever." She felt the weight of his words and the pulse of the light, an ancient heartbeat deep in her chest. Clara stood on the deck, the wood solid beneath her feet, yet everything around her felt suspended in a strange and shifting reality. The silver mist that shrouded the sea seemed alive, curling and unfurling like a living thing. The song that had swelled in the lighthouse now wrapped around them, weaving through the air and vibrating in her very bones. It was an ancient melody, layered with the voices of countless souls, a lament and a plea combined. Her father's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her amidst the surreal expanse. She glanced up at him, the sight of his weathered face etched with both familiarity and the mystery of years lost. His eyes, deep and knowing, carried a glimmer of both pride and warning. "The crossing," he repeated, his voice steady despite the whispers that surrounded them. "This place is where paths meet, where decisions are forged and destinies intertwine." Clara nodded, the realization settling over her like the weight of a storm cloud. The spectral ships that surrounded them rocked gently, their ethereal crews watching with silent anticipation. Some faces were shrouded, mere impressions of features, while others were clearer, their eyes filled with stories that had been abandoned to the sea. "Papa," Clara began, her voice barely above a whisper, "what is it we're meant to do here?" He met her gaze, the lines around his mouth deepening. "We stand on the threshold, Clara. This place tests what we seek and what we're willing to sacrifice to find it. The light called you for a reason. You are a bearer of stories not yet finished, threads that need to be woven together." A chill coursed through her, a mixture of awe and trepidation. Clara looked out over the mist and saw something moving within it. Shapes that defied clear definition, but radiated a presence that made her heart race. One shape, darker and more solid than the rest, seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the song. "What is that?" she asked, her fingers tightening around the edge of the ship's railing. Her father's expression turned grave. "There are those who guide, Clara, and those who guard. But some are bound to this place, seeking to prevent passage, to trap those who falter in their purpose." The shadow moved closer, its form taking shape as it drifted out of the mist. It resembled a man, tall, cloaked in robes that shifted like oil on water, dark and glistening. His eyes, unlike the others, were sharp and glowed with an unnatural blue light that pierced through the haze. "So, the daughter of the Seeker has come." The figure spoke, his voice a silken hiss that sent shivers down Clara's spine. "You tread where many have lost their way." Clara felt her father's hand grip her shoulder more tightly. "Stay close, Clara," he whispered. "Who are you?" Clara demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The shadow figure tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. "I am the keeper of lost paths," he said, stepping closer. The mist parted before him as if it feared his touch. Those who come seeking answers must prove they are worthy to find them. The light you follow can illuminate or deceive. A test of heart and will. Clara swallowed hard, her pulse racing. The ship rocked gently beneath them, the song shifting to a low, mournful drone that seemed to pull at her very soul. "What do you want from us?" her father asked, his voice steady but edged with tension. The keeper's glowing eyes locked onto Clara. "It is not what I want, but what she must choose. Will she step forward, facing the light's truth and shadow alike, or will she falter and become another whisper among the mist?" Clara glanced at her father, the unspoken bond between them sparking with shared resolve. The choice was hers, but it was one she knew he would support no matter the outcome. She drew in a deep breath, stepping away from her father and toward the dark figure. The cold in the air thickened, biting at her skin, but she held her ground. "I will seek the truth," she said, her voice clear. The keeper's smirk faded, replaced by a look of approval that was unsettling in its intensity. He raised an arm, his sleeve billowing like smoke, and pointed to the horizon where the light of the lighthouse pierced through the silver mist. Then follow and find what lies beyond. The deck beneath Clara's feet shuddered, and the world around her shifted. The spectral sailors moved aside as the ship glided forward, propelled by an unseen force. Her father remained close, his gaze never leaving hers, but the worry in his eyes was unmistakable. As the ship sailed deeper into the mist, the song grew stronger, no longer mournful but urgent, carrying a rhythm that matched the pounding of Clara's heart. The spectral figures on the other ships turned their eyes toward her, their gazes filled with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Each face told a story, and Clara could feel the weight of their collective fates pressing against her. The horizon ahead glimmered, the beam of the lighthouse shifting until it formed a corridor of light that cut through the mist. As they entered, the silver gave way to a landscape of swirling, luminous clouds. Shapes moved within the light, figures and places that shifted like memories. Clara reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against one vision that held steady. It was a scene from her childhood. A day on the beach, the waves gentle, her father's laughter mingling with the crash of the surf. The image flickered and dissolved, replaced by another. A stormy night, the sea churning and wild, and her father's form standing at the edge of the cliff, staring out at the horizon, as if he could will something to appear. "You're seeing what you carry?" Her father's voice came, low and steady. Memories that anchor us, moments that define what we seek. The ship moved through the corridor, and with each moment, Clara felt as if she was peeling back layers of herself, exposing fears, hopes, and truths she hadn't dared to acknowledge. The light began to change, its glow deepening to a warm gold that felt like the embrace of a long-lost friend. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the corridor, radiant and familiar. Eleonora stood tall, her translucent form shimmering with the light of the crossing. Her eyes met Clara's, filled with an understanding that transcended words. "Clara," Eleonora said, her voice echoing with the harmony of the song, "you have reached the heart of the crossing. Here truth is revealed, but it must be faced with both courage and acceptance. The light holds your past and future. Are you ready to see what it has kept hidden?" Clara's chest tightened with the weight of the question. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent message of support. She nodded, stepping forward until she stood before Eleonora. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. Eleonora's gaze softened, and she extended her hand. The moment their fingers touched, the corridor of light flared with brilliance. Clara felt a rush of warmth and light envelop her, pulling her into a vortex of memories and visions that spun together in a dazzling array. Scenes from her life passed before her, the joy of painting in the city, the quiet mornings by the sea, the first time she had seen the light over Lulworth Cove. But intertwined with these were glimpses of her father's journey. The maps he studied, the letters he wrote, the nights he stood watch at the edge of the cliffs, waiting for a sign that only he could understand. One vision held steady, clearer than the rest. It was the night her father disappeared. She watched as he stood at the lighthouse, the beams sweeping over the churning waves. A figure emerged from the mist, the keeper of lost paths. Her father spoke, his voice filled with determination and sorrow. "I will find the truth," he said, stepping into the light. The scene blurred, and Clara stood transfixed as the vision of her father stepping into the light faded from view, leaving her wrapped in the golden glow of the crossing. The warmth that had enveloped her moments before began to ebb, replaced by a tingling anticipation that coursed through her veins. The corridor of light around her pulsed softly, alive with energy that resonated deep in her bones. Her father's hand still rested on her shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the ethereal chaos. His eyes, filled with unspoken words, met hers, and she could see the deep creases of worry softened by the weight of resolve. "This place," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "will reveal more than you might be ready to accept, Clara. It holds truths that have been kept at the edge of knowing. Truths that connect us not just to each other, but to the very essence of this world." Before she could respond, Eleanor's figure, still radiant with the glow of the crossing, stepped forward. Her expression was both serene and solemn, as if she too bore the burden of countless stories woven into this place. "Clara," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the harmony of the song, "you have stepped into the heart of the crossing, where memories and reality merge. But the path forward demands more than observation. It asks for understanding and for choice." Clara glanced at her father, searching for reassurance, but his gaze was fixed on Eleanor, as if waiting for her to reveal the next step. The corridor around them shifted, the light deepening to a warm amber that cast long, rippling shadows. The song that filled the space quieted to a low hum, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. "Choice?" Claire echoed, the word tasting unfamiliar on her tongue. Eleanor nodded. Each who comes to the crossing faces a moment when they must decide to hold to what is known or to step forward into the unknown and carry the weight of that truth. The golden light brightened, and new images formed around them. Claire's breath caught as she saw herself as a young girl, sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers smudged with paint as she created wild scenes of lighthouses and stormy seas. The memory pulsed with color and life, each detail vivid. Her father's laughter from the other room, the salty breeze drifting in through the open window, the faint creak of the old wooden floor beneath her chair. The scene shifted, morphing into a darker moment. The night she had stood on the shore, eyes wide and heart pounding as the light over Lulworth Cove blinked out, leaving an emptiness that had never truly been filled. The memory twisted, the past and present colliding in a way that left her feeling raw, exposed. "Why are you showing me this?" Claire's voice trembled, and she reached instinctively for her father's hand. Eleanor's eyes softened. "These moments define your journey, Clara. They are the pieces of the truth you seek, but they are only fragments. To understand the whole, you must confront the light itself." Clara felt her pulse quicken, a sense of urgency taking root in her chest. The spectral figures on the nearby ships watched, their eyes glistening like distant stars. She took a deep breath and nodded, steeling herself for whatever came next. "I'm ready," she said, her voice more confident than she felt. Eleanor raised her hand, and the corridor of light shifted once more, its glow intensifying until it filled every corner of Clara's vision. The warmth transformed into a blazing heat, and she felt as though she were being pulled forward, drawn deeper into the fabric of the crossing. The hum of the song rose, each note threading through her mind until she could no longer distinguish between sound and thought. When the light finally receded, Clara found herself standing in a new place, a vast expanse of endless sky and sea where the horizon seemed to blur into infinity. The ground beneath her feet was neither sand nor wood, but a surface that shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting the swirling hues of gold and blue. Her father stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "This is the threshold," he said, "the place where the truth reveals itself." Before Clara could speak, a figure emerged from the horizon, tall, imposing, and cloaked in robes that shimmered like obsidian under starlight. It was the keeper of lost paths, but now he carried a presence that seemed even more formidable. His eyes, still glowing with that unnatural blue light, met Clara's with an intensity that made her spine stiffen. "You have come far," the keeper said, his voice as deep as the sea. "But understanding comes with sacrifice. Are you prepared to face what the light has hidden?" Clara hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on her. But as she glanced at her father and felt the strength of his unwavering support, she knew her answer. "I am," she said, stepping forward. The keeper nodded, and the air around them shivered. The surface beneath their feet shifted, and suddenly Clara was surrounded by scenes. Memories, fragments of time woven together in a tapestry that told the story of Lulworth Cove and the lighthouse that had guarded it for centuries. She saw the lighthouse being built, stone by stone, on the cliffs by men whose faces were lined with determination and hope. She saw sailors lost at sea, their eyes fixed on the light as they whispered prayers for safe passage. And she saw the first keeper, a woman with hair as wild as the waves, who had stood vigil through storms and silence, her voice raised in song that resonated with the echoes of the crossing. "This light," the keeper said, "has always been more than a beacon. It is a bridge, a guardian, and a test. Those who are called to it are bound by its truth." Clara's breath caught as the images shifted, revealing her father, young and strong, standing on the very edge of the cliff. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, and in his hand he held a journal. The same journal she had discovered in their cottage so many years ago. "The night I disappeared," her father said, his voice breaking through the vision, "I found more than I expected. I found the light's call, and I answered it." Clara turned to him, tears pricking her eyes. "Why didn't you come back? Why did you leave me?" His expression softened, the weight of years visible in the lines around his eyes. "I wanted to return, but the crossing held me. I was caught between worlds, searching for the truth I thought would save us. But the truth, Clara, is not always a thing that frees. Sometimes it binds. It binds. The keeper's eyes flickered, and he stepped forward, his presence looming. You carry the same choice, Seeker, to hold to the past or step forward into what lies beyond. But know that to go further, you must let go of what anchors you. Clara's heart clenched, the weight of the decision pressing harder with each passing moment. She looked at her father, the love and loss mingling in his gaze, and knew that the path she took would change everything. But beneath the fear, a spark of determination flared. I choose to understand, she said, her voice steady. The keeper inclined his head, and the world around them exploded in light, each fragment of memory and truth swirling together into a storm that consumed them both. When the light faded, Clara stood alone, the echoes of the crossing humming in her veins. The choice had been made, and the story of the light was only beginning to reveal itself. Clara stood in the silent aftermath, the echoes of light and memory settling into the stillness around her. The crossing had left her feeling raw, as though the boundaries between her past, present, and future had thinned to a near breaking point. She took a deep breath, the cool, briny air filling her lungs as she tried to steady herself. The landscape before her shimmered with a surreal beauty. The ground, smooth and reflective like polished obsidian, stretched out beneath a sky where gold and indigo wove together in a dance of light. Clara's heart ached with the weight of the choice she had made and the truths she had glimpsed. She turned, expecting to see her father beside her, but the space was empty. The sense of loss swept over her, sharp and sudden. He had been here, close enough to touch, and now he was gone again. But she knew, deep down, that his absence was not permanent. He was part of this place, bound to the light just as she now was. Clara. The voice came from behind her, soft and melodic, with an undercurrent of power. She turned and found Eleonora standing at the edge of the vast expanse, her translucent form glowing faintly in the dim light. The keeper's eyes were kind but resolute, carrying the weight of many stories. You have faced the crossing and embraced its truth, Eleonora said, but the journey is not complete. The light has shown you glimpses, but there is more you must understand. Clara nodded, the resolve in her chest solidifying. I'm ready to know, no matter what it reveals. Eleonora stepped closer, the air around her humming with a quiet energy. The light at Lulworth Cove is both a guardian and a test. It connects the living and the lost, and it has watched over this place for centuries. But its power draws from those who seek it, from the stories they bring and the choices they make. The sky above them shifted, the deep blues blending into fiery oranges and golds, as if marking the passage of time. Clara felt the pulse of the crossing thrum beneath her feet, resonating through her bones. Why was I called? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Why my father? Eleonora's eyes darkened. a shadow passing over her luminous features, because you are part of its story. The light calls to those who are entwined with its purpose. Your father heard it first, drawn by the need to find answers, to protect what he cherished most. But when he crossed into the heart of the light, he found not just answers but a burden, a bond that bound him to its power. Clara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of what she had seen and felt. The nights her father spent staring out at the sea, the journal filled with sketches and notes that spoke of paths between worlds. It all made sense now. And now it calls to me, Clara said, the realization settling heavily within her. Yes, Eleonora said, the light chose you because you are both a seeker and a guardian. You have the will to face what lies ahead and the strength to bear it. Before Clara could respond, a ripple passed through the air, and the horizon began to shimmer. The reflective ground beneath her feet trembled as if awakening to a power that had long lain dormant. Shapes began to coalesce within the mist, figures wrapped in shadows, their forms wavering as if caught between substance and smoke. "What is this?" Clara asked, her pulse quickening. Eleonora's expression turned grave. "These are the echoes, souls caught in the crossing, unable to move forward or return. They are bound by the choices they made and the truths they refused to face." The echoes moved slowly, their faces obscured, but Clara could feel the weight of their presence, the sadness and longing that clung to them like mist. One figure stood apart from the rest, more defined and familiar. Clara's breath caught in her chest as recognition flooded her. "Mother?" The figure stepped forward, the shadows peeling away to reveal a woman with soft, dark hair and eyes that mirrored Clara's own. The air between them crackled with a silent energy, and tears pricked Clara's eyes. "Clara," her mother said, her voice trembling with both love and sorrow, "you've come so far." Clara's knees threatened to give way. "I've missed you," she whispered, the words thick with emotion. Her mother's expression softened. "I have watched you, my darling, always. But this place holds me, as it holds so many. The light is not just a guide. It is a gatekeeper. It shows what must be seen and tests the hearts of those who seek to pass." Clara reached out, her fingers brushing against the faint shimmer of her mother's form. "I don't understand. Why are you here? Why can't you come back with me?" "Because I, too, made a choice," her mother said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I followed the light long ago, searching for answers when your father first heard its call. But I was afraid of what I found, and that fear bound me here, caught between the worlds." The weight of her mother's confession pressed down on Clara, but it was tempered by a dawning realization. "But I can still change this, can't I? I can face the light and make it right?" Eleonora stepped forward, her presence luminous. "The crossing allows those who enter to confront what binds them. Your mother's path was one of seeking, but yours is different, Clara. You are here to understand and to choose." Clara looked at her mother, the love between them a tangible thing that defied the space and shadows. "I won't let this place hold you forever," she said, her voice firm with determination. Her mother's expression was a mix of pride and sadness. "It is not only my fate that you carry, Clara. The light tests not just our strength, but our willingness to let go. You must face what it shows you without fear." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the hum of the crossing in her veins. The figures around her shifted, the mist swirling with a restless energy. The keeper of lost paths stood at the edge of the horizon, watching with eyes that glowed like burning coals. "The light waits," Eleanor said, "but it will not wait forever." Clara turned to face the beam of light that cut through the shifting mist. Bright and unwavering, each step she took resonated through the ground, the pulse of the crossing matching the beat of her heart. The glow intensified as she approached, the air thick with anticipation. The moment she stepped into the light, it wrapped around her like a storm. Memories and visions collided, forming a torrent that surged through her mind. She saw the past, her father's desperate search for answers, her mother's hesitant step into the unknown, and her own childhood marked by questions that had never been answered. But then the light shifted, showing her more, the truth it had guarded for generations. She saw the keepers who had come before, their voices raised in song as they stood at the edge of the crossing, watching over those who dared to seek. She saw the threads of fate, woven together by choices and bound by the light's power. And she saw herself, standing not as a lost seeker, but as a guardian, the echo of her parents' journeys within her, but not defining her. The storm of light eased, and Clara found herself back on the polished obsidian like ground. The figures of the echoes had drawn back, their forms less heavy, less trapped. Her mother stood at the forefront, a soft smile on her lips. "You have done what many could not," her mother said, her voice warm with pride. Eleanor's presence was steady, a beacon. "The light has accepted your truth, Clara. The crossing is no longer a place of bindings, but of passage." Clara felt a release, as if a weight she had carried all her life had lifted. She turned to her father, who now stood beside her, eyes filled with unspoken love. Clara stood between her mother and father, their forms etched in the soft, otherworldly glow of the crossing. The silence that followed was profound, charged with the weight of the past and the anticipation of what was yet to come. She felt an inexplicable lightness, as though she had finally set down a burden she hadn't realized she had been carrying. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady but tentative. Her father's eyes, deep with years of secrets and sorrow, met hers with a new kind of pride. "Now, you must guide the light, Clara. It is no longer a place of trials for you, but of purpose." Eleanor stepped forward, her translucent form shifting with the light's pulse. "The crossing has accepted you as its keeper, Clara. The bond is yours to hold and protect, but with this, there comes responsibility." Clara's pulse quickened. She had come seeking answers, only to find that she was now part of the story she had pursued so desperately, The echoes around them seemed to ripple, their restless energy softening as if in acknowledgement of the new keeper. "Why was the light so important?" Clara asked, turning back to Eleonora. "Why did it call my father? And why did my mother seek it too?" Eleonora's eyes, luminous and endless, softened with understanding. "The light is more than a beacon for the lost. It is a bridge between worlds, between what is remembered and what is forgotten. Those who are drawn to it seek not only answers, but reconciliation with what lies within them." Clara's mother reached out, her hand hovering just above Clara's cheek. Though it felt insubstantial, a warmth radiated from her touch. "When I first followed the light, I sought to protect your father and you, but fear held me back, and it bound me here. Unable to move forward, I see now that my path was part of yours." The realization settled over Clara like a tide, drawing back to reveal what it had hidden. She had been connected to this place, this light, from the start. The stories her father told, the nights he spent by the cliffs, and the unanswered questions that filled her childhood were not random fragments, but pieces of a puzzle that now fit together. "I understand," she said, the words more for herself than for those around her. "The light is part of us, of our story. It's not just a guide, it's a part of who we are." Her father's face broke into a rare, broad smile. "Yes, Clara. And now it is your story to shape." The echoes in the distance stirred, their forms no longer shadowed but tinged with a faint glow. One by one, they began to drift toward the light's beam, their presence lighter, almost relieved. Clara watched as they passed, some faces familiar, others unknown, each carrying the essence of stories long held within the boundaries of the crossing. "They are moving on," Eleonora said, her voice resonating with the song that hummed through the air. "You have given them what they needed, an end to their binding and a path forward." Clara's heart swelled with an unfamiliar blend of sadness and fulfillment. This was what her father had tried to do, what her mother had sought, and now she had become the keeper who could complete it. She felt the light within her shift, no longer just an external force, but something intertwined with her very essence. "Clara," her mother said softly, her voice carrying a gentle urgency. "The light will need more than just a guardian. It will need someone who understands that its power comes from stories. Yours, ours, 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 and those yet to be told." Clara nodded, feeling the truth of her mother's words. She was not just here to protect the light, but to guide it, to help it grow and continue its purpose. The realization brought a sense of peace, even as the world around them shimmered with the final whispers of departing echoes. A sudden shift in the air drew Clara's attention. The keeper of lost paths, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, his dark robes glistening like oil under starlight. His eyes, once fierce and testing, now held an expression she had not seen before. Respect. "Seeker," he said, his voice still deep and resonant, but no longer edged with challenge. "You have proven your worth. The crossing yields to you now, and with it, its stories. Clara met his gaze, her heart steady. "Thank you, Keeper." He inclined his head, the shadows around him softening. "The path you walk will not always be clear, but remember, the light is within you, and so are the voices of those who came before." As he spoke, the last of the echoes faded into the golden light, their forms dissolving into the mist. The crossing grew quieter, the song mellowing to a hum that resonated in Clara's chest. Eleanor stepped forward, her form shimmering as if she too was preparing to depart. "This is where we part?" "Clara," Eleanor said, her eyes filled with a quiet pride. "But remember, the crossing is not just a place. It is a story that lives as long as those who tell it. Guide it well." Clara felt a pang of sadness, but nodded, understanding the weight of her role. "I will." With that, Eleanor's form dissolved into the light, leaving only the warm glow that surrounded Clara and her parents. Her father stepped closer, his eyes full of love and pride. "This is not goodbye, Clara," he said, his voice steady and sure. "You are the light's keeper now, but we are always part of it, part of you." Clara felt the tears well up, but they were not tears of sorrow. She reached out, feeling the warmth of his hand one last time before he, too, began to fade into the golden light. Her mother followed, her smile soft and eternal. "We will always be with you," her mother whispered, her form dissolving like a sunbeam melting into the horizon. Clara stood alone in the expanse, the light of the crossing now pulsing gently around her, not as an external force, but as a part of her very being. The sky above shifted, the golds and blues blending into the familiar deep indigo of Lulworth Cove at twilight. She felt the ground beneath her feet solidify, the polished obsidian giving way to the rough texture of the cliffs she knew so well. When the light finally faded, Clara found herself standing once more at the edge of the cliff, the lighthouse behind her and the sea stretching out before her. The wind whispered through her hair, carrying the scent of salt and the sound of the waves. But now, she felt a new presence within her, the stories of those who had come before, the light that connected them all, and the knowledge that she was its guardian. She turned to look at the lighthouse, its beams sweeping over the sea with a steady, rhythmic glow. It was no longer just a structure to her. It was a part of her story, a part of the stories she would protect and guide. The voices of the crossing, now quieter but always present, resonated within her. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the light within her pulse with purpose. The crossing was not an end, but a beginning, a bridge between what was known and what was yet to be discovered. And she, Clara, was its keeper. With one last look at the horizon, she whispered, "Let the stories continue." And with that, she turned toward the lighthouse, ready to begin the next chapter of her journey. Clara stood in the amber twilight of Lulworth Cove, the wind brushing her cheeks and the steady beam of the lighthouse sweeping over the sea. The crossing had ended, yet its echoes lingered in her veins like an ancient song. She turned from the horizon and looked back at the lighthouse, feeling its presence more deeply than ever. It was no longer just a landmark, but an extension of herself. A sentinel of stories, a keeper of connections between the known and unknown. The realization brought a surge of responsibility. Claire knew she couldn't stand on the edge of discovery without stepping into her role fully. The voices of those who had passed through the crossing whispered within her, urging her onward, each one a reminder that their stories were now part of her own. The path to the lighthouse felt different beneath her feet, each step carrying a sense of purpose that steadied her pulse. The old stones of the tower seemed to hum as she approached, resonating with the energy she now carried. When she reached the wooden door, it opened without resistance, as though welcoming her home. Inside, the light from the lantern room above sent shafts of gold spilling down the narrow staircase, painting the walls with a warm glow. Clara climbed the spiral steps, each turn revealing glimpses of the sea through small arched windows. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below accompanied her, a rhythmic pulse that matched her heartbeat. When she reached the top, the room was exactly as she remembered it, filled with the scent of oil and salt, the great lantern turning with a soft mechanical whir. But now there was something more, an intangible presence that filled the space, wrapping around her like an embrace. Clara placed her hand on the metal railing that encircled the light. Its heat seeped into her palm, and for a moment she felt as though she were holding the sun itself. The glow intensified, brightening until it surrounded her, pulling her into a vision that flickered between the real and the ethereal. She found herself on the cliffs, watching a storm churn the sea into a chaos of foam and spray. The lighthouse beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a ship tossed by the waves, its sails shredded and its crew struggling to hold it steady. The ship's name, Elysian Star, gleamed faintly under the searing light. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The ship was familiar. Its story, one of the many her father had recounted during winter nights by the fire. It was said to have disappeared centuries ago, lost to the tempests that roamed the coast. The legend spoke of sailors who had sighted the mysterious light before vanishing without a trace, leaving only whispers behind. But now, the whispers were more than stories. Claire could see the faces of the crew, their expressions etched with both hope and despair. The captain stood at the helm, eyes locked on the light, lips moving as if in prayer. The wind snatched his words and hurled them into the night, but Claire could feel their weight, each one a plea not just for survival, but for salvation. The scene shifted, and she was back in the lantern room, the glow of the light steady and warm. The vision left her trembling, the vividness of it making her pulse race. The Elysian Star had been seeking the light, drawn to it like so many others who had come before and after, and now she understood why. It was not just a beacon, but a call, a promise of guidance for those willing to trust it. A creak behind her made Clara turn sharply. Standing in the doorway was Samuel, his eyes wide with both awe and concern. His dark hair was ruffled from the wind, and he carried a lantern in one hand, its light paling in comparison to the glow surrounding Clara. I had a feeling I'd find you here," he said, his voice rough from the climb but soft with familiarity. "You weren't at the cottage and, well, the light seemed different tonight." Clara smiled, a mix of surprise and relief coursing through her. "Samuel, there's so much I need to tell you." He stepped inside, setting the lantern on a nearby table. "Then tell me. I've spent enough nights wondering what mysteries this place holds. If anyone knows now, it's you." Clara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She spoke of the crossing, of her parents, and their unfinished journeys, of the echoes she had guided and the truth she now held. Samuel listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers, even when the weight of her story made the room seem smaller, more intimate. When she finished, the silence that followed was thick with shared understanding. Samuel's eyes softened, and he reached for her hand. "Clara, I always knew you were drawn to the sea, to this lighthouse, but I never realized how deep that connection ran. What does it mean now for you? For us?" Clara squeezed his hand, the warmth of his touch anchoring her. "It means I'm the keeper of this light. Samuel, it means I'm tied to the stories it holds and the people it guides. But it doesn't have to mean distance or solitude. I think it means sharing that light, letting it be a bridge between what we know and what we seek." Samuel nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "Then let's make sure those stories continue together." The simple promise in his words filled Clara with a sense of belonging she hadn't known she needed. The weight of her new role felt lighter with him by her side, a reminder that even in guardianship there was room for companionship and love. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing their attention to the sea beyond. The beam of the lighthouse swept over the dark waves, its reach endless, unwavering. Clara's eyes followed its path, and she felt the whispers within her settle, their voices merging into a single harmonious hum. The world outside the lighthouse was vast and full of mysteries, yet to be told. But Clara knew, as she stood beside Samuel with the light at her back, that she was ready for them. The lighthouse would stand, as it always had, a beacon for those who needed it, a guardian of stories long past and stories yet to come. And Clara, its keeper, would be there to guide the way, ensuring that the voices of the crossing were never forgotten, their tales carried on the wind through the beam of light that swept across the restless sea. The dawn came slowly over Lulworth Cove, painting the sky in a gradient of soft pinks and golds that blended seamlessly into the pale blue of early morning. Clara watched from the lantern room of the lighthouse. The steady beam now softened as the sun began its rise. The sea below shimmered with the first touches of daylight, each wave catching the sun's warmth as if drawing life from its touch. Clara took in the scene, her thoughts drifting over the events of the past days. The revelations of the crossing, the acceptance of her role as the new keeper, and Samuel's unwavering support had transformed her world. The weight of her new responsibilities still pressed on her, but it felt lighter now, interwoven with purpose and understanding. Samuel's voice broke the silence, low and warm as he climbed the final steps to join her. "I thought I'd find you up here." Clara turned to him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I couldn't sleep. There's something about watching the dawn from here. It feels different now." He nodded, stepping closer until they stood side by side. "It's like the light itself has a heartbeat, doesn't it? Ever since you told me about the crossing, I can almost feel it too." Claire's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a seamless embrace. "It's alive in a way I never truly understood before. The light isn't just a beacon, it's a bridge between stories, between those lost and those seeking." Samuel's hand found hers, his touch grounding her. "And now it's yours to guide." The gentle hum of the lighthouse's mechanisms filled the quiet, a comforting reminder of its constancy. Clara leaned into Samuel, letting the warmth of his presence settle over her. But the peace was fleeting. A sudden shiver ran down her spine, a sensation she recognized from the crossing, a shift in the air as though something unseen was drawing near. Before she could voice her unease, the wind outside the lighthouse intensified, rattling the glass panes and sending a chill through the room. Clara's eyes narrowed as she peered out at the cove. The water, which moments before had been calm and reflective, now churned with an unnatural restlessness. Dark shapes moved beneath the surface, hints of shadows that defied the light of dawn. Samuel noticed her sudden tension and followed her gaze. "What is it? Do you see something?" Clara swallowed, her heartbeat quickening. "The sea. There's something there." As if in response, the beam of the lighthouse intensified, cutting through the morning light with a force that made the air vibrate. Clara felt the hum within her chest, an urgent call that resonated with the stories held in the crossing. The whispers she had carried since accepting her role grew louder, a chorus of voices overlapping with a singular message. They return. Clara's breath caught, the weight of those words sinking deep into her bones. She turned to Samuel, her voice steady but urgent. "There's something happening. The crossing isn't just a place of passage. It's also a gate, and something or someone is trying to come through." Samuel's eyes widened, but he didn't falter. "Then we face it. Whatever it is, you're not alone, Clara." A sudden jolt rocked the lighthouse, sending a tremor through the floor that made both of them brace against the railing. The light above them flared brighter, its beams stretching impossibly far into the distance, illuminating the sea with a golden path that led beyond the horizon. And then, through the shimmering light, a shape began to form. A ship, its sails full, despite the windless morning, its hull carved from dark, weathered wood. Clara recognized it instantly. Elysian Star, the ship she had seen in her vision. The spectral vessel glided forward, breaking through the barrier between the crossing and the world with an eerie, otherworldly grace. Its crew, figures of translucent blue and silver, stood at attention, their faces set with a solemn purpose. At the helm, the captain held the wheel with both hands, his eyes fixed on the lighthouse beam. Clara's breath quickened as the voices within her pulsed louder, a cacophony of emotions that surged and twisted. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself, drawing on the light within. When she opened them, she saw the captain's gaze shift, meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart pound. Samuel's grip on her hand tightened. "Clara, who are they?" "They're the lost," she whispered, understanding dawning on her like the break of a storm. "They're the ones who were called by the light, but couldn't find their way through. They're seeking passage." The captain's voice carried across the waves, deep and resonant. "Keeper, we come not to haunt, but to seek. We are bound to the light, and only through its keeper can we find peace." Clara's heart ached at the plea, at the weight of so many lives left adrift between worlds. She stepped forward, letting go of Samuel's hand and raising her own toward the beam of the lighthouse. The warmth of it met her fingers, pulsing as though acknowledging her touch. "I am here," she called, her voice steady and clear. "You are not forgotten. I will guide you." The sea roared, waves rising and falling with a fury that mirrored the voices within her. The beam of light widened, casting a path that reached out to the Galician star. The crew moved as one, a chorus of motion that brought the ship forward, closer to the lighthouse and the promise it held. The captain's expression shifted from solemnity to something softer, a glimmer of hope breaking through the stern lines of his face. "Keeper, the crossing holds many stories. Ours has waited long enough." Clara nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Then come, let the light guide you home." The ship moved slowly at first, then with increasing speed as it followed the beam. The voices within Clara swelled, a song of release and reconciliation, carrying with it the weight of centuries. The Elysian star reached the edge of the cove, its hull barely brushing the rocks before it shimmered and dissolved. The figures of the crew turning into wisps of silver that rose and mingled with the light before disappearing into the dawn. The wind calmed, and the sea settled once more, the silence that followed more profound than any Clara had known. She felt the light within her pulse, its rhythm matching her heartbeat. As the whispers finally quieted, their purpose fulfilled. Samuel stepped closer, his eyes filled with awe and a touch of reverence. "You did it. You brought them home." Clara exhaled slowly, a smile breaking through the exhaustion that threatened to overtake her. "We did. The stories they carried will live on, and the light will always guide those who seek it." The morning sun rose higher, casting its warm glow over Lulworth Cove, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Clara felt truly at peace. The lighthouse stood tall and unwavering, its beam a symbol of hope and connection, a reminder that even in the vastness of the unknown, there was light to guide the way. With Samuel at her side, she turned to face the day, ready for whatever stories the horizon might hold. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the stones of the lighthouse and illuminating the cove in a wash of golden light. Clara stood at the window of the lantern room, watching as the sea calmed from the night's tumult. The spectral ship, Elysian Star, and its crew had found their way home, but the echoes of their voices lingered in her mind like a song she couldn't shake. The air felt charged, a subtle reminder that the crossing's mysteries were far from fully revealed. Samuel leaned against the metal railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He turned to her, eyes reflecting the dawn. "Do you think there will be others? More who come seeking the light?" Clara nodded, a weight settling in her chest. "There will always be others. Samuel, the crossing holds more stories than we can imagine. Some are ready to be told, and some are still waiting for the right time." He took a step closer, the warmth of his presence grounding her. "You don't have to face them alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The simplicity of his statement comforted her. They had come so far in such a short time, and with every new revelation, Samuel had remained by her side. She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining as they stood in silence, the steady sweep of the lighthouse beam their only witness. But the peace was interrupted by a sudden shift in the air, a cold gust that swept through the room, rattling the glass panes and extinguishing the oil lantern that had been left burning. The warmth fled, replaced by a chill that sank into Clara's bones. The whispers within her stirred, urgent and discordant. Samuel's brow furrowed. "What was that?" Clara's eyes narrowed, the chill heightening her senses. Something's changed. The beam of the lighthouse intensified, as if in response, casting a stark path across the sea that reached deep into the horizon. Clara felt the pulse of it resonate through her, an echo that spoke of an unseen presence. She turned back to the window and gasped. Far out on the water, where the sky and sea met, a dark shape began to emerge. At first, it was only a shadow, amorphous and shifting, but as it drew closer, the shape took form, a massive ship, larger and more imposing than the Ecclesian, with sails torn and hull weathered from countless storms. The ship seemed to defy the light, its darkness absorbing the golden glow and casting it back in cold, jagged shards. Samuel's eyes widened. "That's not like the others. It feels wrong." Clara's pulse quickened, a sense of dread washing over her. The voices within whispered warnings, fragments of stories and names long forgotten. One voice, clearer than the others, rose above the rest. Lenora's carrying a message from beyond. "The Keeper of Shadows returns. Beware, for it seeks not guidance, but dominion." The words struck like a blow, leaving Clara breathless. The Keeper of Shadows, a figure whispered in the oldest tales, one who had once tried to wield the crossing's power for control, only to be cast into the space between worlds. But now it seemed that exile was ending. "Samuel, we need to act. This isn't just another lost soul. This is something far more dangerous." Samuel's jaw tightened. "What do we do?" Clara turned to the beam, the light thrumming beneath her fingertips. "We have to strengthen the light, make it so powerful that even the Keeper cannot break through." Together they worked quickly. Samuel gathered extra oil and fed the flame, while Clara adjusted the lenses and mechanisms, directing every ounce of power the lighthouse possessed into the beam. The room filled with a brilliant glow, so intense that it felt like standing in the heart of a sun. But as the light grew, so did the darkness outside. The ship advanced, moving with unnatural speed, its presence warping the air around it. Figures appeared on its deck, wraith-like and restless, their eyes glowing with a cold blue light that made Clara's skin crawl. A voice deep and echoing rolled across the waves and pierced the walls of the lighthouse. "Keeper, your light is strong, but your resolve will falter. The crossing belongs to the shadows, and you will bow before its true master." Clara's heart thudded in her chest, fear clawing at her resolve. She glanced at Samuel, who met her gaze with unwavering determination. "We won't let that happen," he said. Drawing on every ounce of courage, Clara reached for the center of the light, feeling its warmth pulse against her skin. The whispers inside her surged, a chorus of encouragement and strength. Eleanor's voice came again, softer but sure. "You are more than a keeper. Clara, you are a guardian of stories, a guide for those who seek the truth. Let the light draw from your strength, your belief in what is right." Clara closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she felt to the crossing, to the stories of those who had come before her. She let their hopes and struggles flow through her, weaving them into the beam of light that shone out into the dark. It brightened, the gold intensifying until it blazed like molten fire. The ship shuddered under the force of the light, its dark sails quivering as the figures on deck recoiled. The voice boomed again, this time with a note of desperation. "You cannot hold this power forever. Keeper, the shadows will rise." But Clara did not waver. The light belongs to all who seek it. It will never bow to the darkness. The ship strained against the light, the wraiths howling as the beam cut through them, unraveling their forms into shreds of shadow that dissipated into the wind. The vessel itself groaned, its wood splintering as the power of the crossing overwhelmed it. With a final resounding crack, the ship fragmented, pieces scattering across the waves before dissolving into nothingness. The silence that followed was deafening. The beam of the lighthouse returned to its steady sweep, casting a golden path over a sea that had stilled to a glassy calm. Clara's knees buckled, exhaustion washing over her as the light's pull eased. Samuel caught her, steadying her with strong arms. "It's over," he whispered, relief and awe mingling in his voice. Clara nodded, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. For now. The morning sun climbed higher, chasing away the last traces of shadow. Clara felt the warmth of it on her skin, a reminder that light, for all its fragility, could still prevail. She looked out at the horizon where the sea sparkled with the promise of a new day. But deep in her heart, she knew this was not the end. The crossing held secrets she had yet to uncover, and while she had faced the keeper of shadows and won, there would be more tests to come. She was the guardian now, not just of the lighthouse, but of the stories it held, the souls it guided, and the light that connected them all. With Samuel's steady presence beside her and the voices of those who had come before whispering their approval, Clara felt a sense of purpose, unlike any she had known. She would be ready for whatever came next. The light would stand unwavering, a beacon for all who needed it. And as the dawn fully embraced the cove, Clara whispered a promise to the sea, to the light, and to herself. Let the stories never fade. The morning light stretched long and golden across Lulworth Cove, casting a warm glow that seemed to chase away the lingering chill of the night. The echoes of the battle against the Keeper of Shadows still thrummed through Clara, a resonant reminder of the weight she now carried as the guardian of the crossing. Yet, as the sun rose higher, washing the cove in brilliant light, a quiet resolve settled over her. This was the day she would write the next chapter in the Lighthouse's story, one that honored the past and embraced the future. Clara stood at the window of the lantern room, watching as the sea sparkled like a field of diamonds under the sun's rays. The lighthouse beam, once strained to its limit, now swept over the water with a calm, rhythmic grace, a silent testament to its resilience. Samuel's footsteps echoed up the spiral stairs, and she turned to greet him, the weight of the last day evident in both their eyes. "Clara," he said, a smile breaking through the tired lines of his face, "you need rest." Clara shook her head, though she reached for his hand, needing the steady reassurance of his touch. "There will be time for that soon, but first there's something I need to do." Samuel's brow furrowed in concern. The Keeper of Shadows was defeated. What more could there be? It wasn't just about defeating the darkness, Claire said, the words coming slowly, as if she were piecing together a puzzle as she spoke. The crossing holds stories. Samuel. Lives that were paused, dreams that were left unfinished. It's time for them to move on, and for me to truly step into my role as guardian. Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. He nodded, squeezing her hand. "Then let's do it together." They descended the narrow steps, the ancient stone cool under their feet, and stepped out onto the platform that encircled the lighthouse. The morning air was fresh, carrying with it the scent of salt and the sound of gulls calling as they circled above. Clara took a deep breath, letting the light and sea fill her senses. Clara raised her arms, palms open toward the sky, and closed her eyes. She felt the light within her pulse and reach outward, connecting to the beam of the lighthouse. It was a strange, exhilarating sensation, like holding both the vastness of the sea and the warmth of the sun in her hands. The whispers that had once been a dissonant chorus in her mind now spoke in harmony, guiding her. "Keeper, the time is now. The stories seek their final telling." A shiver ran down her spine, but it was not one of fear. It was anticipation, the weight of knowing she was about to become more than a keeper. She was about to become a part of the story herself. The beam of light brightened, spreading out over the sea until it bathed the entire cove in a golden glow. From the depths of the water, figures began to rise, shimmering forms that seemed to be woven from the fabric of the crossing itself. Clara's heart ached at the sight. Men and women, sailors and townsfolk, each face etched with the longing and hope of those who had been caught between worlds for far too long. Samuel's breath caught as he watched, awe and disbelief mixing on his face. "Clara, there?" "Echoes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're the ones who never found their way home." The figures moved closer, stepping out of the water and onto the rocky shore, their eyes bright with a light that mirrored the beam of the lighthouse. They paused as if waiting for something, for permission, for release. Clara felt a rush of emotion, the combined stories of their lives pressing against her heart. "Your stories are seen," she said, her voice steady as it carried over the water. "Your journey is known. The light welcomes you home." A ripple of energy moved through the echoes, and one by one they began to glow brighter, their forms becoming more solid, more real. A woman with hair that shimmered like starlight stepped forward, eyes locked on Clara. She bowed her head, tears glistening on her cheeks. "Keep her," the woman said, her voice soft and melodic. "We have waited for this moment, bound by the edges of the crossing, unable to step into the light, but now you have brought us home." Clara's eyes filled with tears, the gratitude in the woman's voice wrapping around her like a warm embrace. "You are free now. Your stories will live on, told and remembered." The woman smiled, and her form shimmered one last time before dissolving into a burst of light that rose into the sky, followed by the others. Each echo ascended, their essence joining the morning sun, brightening the sky until it seemed as though dawn itself had returned for a second time. Samuel's hand tightened around Clara's as they watched the last of the echoes disappear. The beam of the lighthouse returned to its steady path, its glow soft and content. The air felt different. Lighter, as though the cove itself had been holding its breath and could now exhale. "You did it," Samuel said, turning to face her. "You set them free." Clara nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "We did." The day passed in a haze of golden light and quiet reflection. The village, sensing the shift in the air, seemed to come alive with a new kind of energy. Children played on the beach, their laughter ringing out over the waves, while fishermen cast their nets with renewed hope. Word of the strange events at the lighthouse spread, whispers weaving into new tales that would be told for generations. As evening fell, Clara and Samuel sat on the cliffs, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned a deep indigo, flecked with the first stars of night. The beam of the lighthouse swept over the darkening water, a faithful guardian that would never waver. Samuel broke the silence, his voice low and thoughtful. "Do you think there will ever come a time when the light isn't needed? When all the stories are told?" Clara looked at him, the weight of the question settling in her chest. She thought of Eleonora, of the Keeper of Shadows, of the echoes who had finally found peace. She thought of the crossing, a place where worlds met and stories intertwined. "No," she said, the certainty in her voice surprising even her. "There will always be new stories, new voices seeking the light, But that's the beauty of it, Samuel. The light isn't just for guiding the lost. It's for reminding all of us that even in the darkest moments, there is a way through. He nodded, a smile curving his lips. Then we'll make sure it stays strong together. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, the warmth of him blending with the cool breeze that swept in from the sea. The lighthouse beam passed over them, its light steady and true, a silent promise that it would always be there, watching and waiting, a guardian of stories and a beacon for those who sought its path. As the stars blinked to life above them, Clara whispered into the night, a vow as eternal as the light she kept. Let the stories continue and let the light never fade. And as the waves whispered their agreement, carrying her words out to the vast, endless sea, Clara knew that the crossing, the lighthouse, and the stories it held would live on, forever part of Lulworth Cove, forever part of her.